Okay, so this video, normally I like to just talk about the product or things about wrestling off the top of my head and let it roll. This time I've wrote down everything so I can be precise in what I'm going to say in this video. And since I mentioned comparisons between 2009 and 2010, which everyone knows if they've listened before, I hate that time in WWE, and then now 2019, 2020, which is, if you want to say this is the worst time, I can't argue with that, especially with what's going on with the no fans now. But yeah, I'm going to compare and make the argument as to still why I think 2009, 2010 is the worst, and I will still always say that as bad as things are now. So I'm going to make comparisons between the two, mention some good things about both, but mainly bad. So obviously the Saudi shows are one of the worst things about the time now, other than the no crowd stuff that's going on at this moment in time. But Crown Jewel 2019, 2018 were absolutely awful. Fury, Velasquez, and 2018 DX versus Brothers of Destruction. However, I'll go back to what I talked about in my last video, and I've talked about on my old account, celebrity guest hosts made Raw unwatchable. The guys that they got on had no idea about the product. Most of them looked like they didn't want to be there or didn't have a clue when they were there. You know, just no relevance to try and get ratings, and it made the product suffer overall for me. The guys who were pushed as champions in 2009, 2010 years were a lot worse than any of the guys now. Obviously now last year you had Rollins and Kofi, and you've got McIntyre now. And while I've not been the biggest fan of any of those reigns, you compare the workers then to now, and nearly the whole of the roster these days are better workers than back then, a decade ago, and most of them are cooler. Kevin Owens would have been a way better heel champion last year than, for example, what Sheamus was at the end of 2009 going into 2010. John Morrison should have been pushed over Sheamus at TLC 09 against John Cena. Heel Bryan was a better champion than The Miz was in 2010. Miz should have been nowhere near the belt. Like Kevin Nash has said before, and I've mentioned, if Miz is your WWE champion, it's basically admitting that wrestling is fake. Everything looks choreographed with The Miz. Then I'd even argue Montez Ford is better now than Kofi was in 2009. Has more charisma and still has the insane athleticism. McIntyre, not a big fan by any means, but he's better than Jack Swagger as heavyweight champion back then, or even Sheamus yet again. McIntyre would have been a better decision back then as the chosen one, to be honest, even to win the belt. A green McIntyre, a young one. Cena v Orton back then was the most boring feud ever. I will argue with anyone that stretch from SummerSlam 2009 to TLC 2009. Where they had the matches at SummerSlam, bragging rights, Breaking Point. Just incredibly boring. Randy Orton at this time, the legacy leader with the fully shaved head, and Cena was just way too PG and cartoonish during this time. It's Super Cena, 2009, 2010. He hardly ever got beat without interference, or when he did lose the title to Sheamus at TLC, that was like an accidental finish, where Cena just clearly jumps off the rope. That pissed me off, that finish, just the way they'd done it. Cena just clearly jumps backwards through the table. And I don't even think Sheamus was meant to win, because I think he was meant to go through the table on the outside and it'd be a draw. So that whole thing just pissed me off, that match. So even Brock these last few years, Brock in 2019, 2018, when he hardly showed up, I'd take that over Cena v Orton in 2009. And that's saying something, as Brock's pissed me off these last few years, the way he only shows up the main pay-per-views and doesn't ever go over 10 minutes in matches. just no effort whatsoever from him. But it's still better than back then. DX reunited. What was the point in that? Didn't even feel they needed to reunite in 2006, let alone this one in 2009 when they reunited for a second time, or third time even. The stuff with Hornswoggle, just embarrassing. When DX used to always interact with Hornswoggle, and matches with Legacy. Just if you do make DX reunited, at least give them other legends to face, stuff that would have been interesting. Maybe Undertaker and Kane back then versus DX, a decade earlier. Not matches with Legacy at SummerSlam and Breaking Point. I think it was just a way for Shawn Michaels to rest up for his Mania matches, just be putting tag matches and not have to put too much effort in. But those matches were just a waste of DX. Then this is the main part of the video I wanted to get into. Guys like Technical Work Rate Productions, who bitch quite a lot about things. When I've listened to their videos in the past, I don't get how they defend guys just because they're big, they're a big physique. Well, someone can be big, but if they're not offering anything else, what's the point in them? Like, they like Sheamus for being big, but they hate on Jack Swagger. Now, I dislike both guys, but they always abuse Jack Swagger for having a lisp. Sheamus had a lisp and a heavy Irish accent. So for me, it was just as bad, if not worse, on promos. So what else are those type of guys offering other than being big? That's where I'll give the likes of Batista credit. Sheamus isn't a bad worker, but he's not got the charisma or mic skills, and he's not a great worker. I'd just say he's good for a big man. That's where with Batista, good in ring for a big man, but could cut promos and had a cool character that everyone, nearly everyone liked. And then the best thing I ever seen Sheamus do, just so I'm not giving him too much hate, is I'll give him credit in 2012 as a face. Sheamus that was his best run as a face, but by then it was too late. He'd already had that super push at the end of 2009. He had, which was boring, and he defeated Cena, which I didn't like, that accidental finish I talked about. Then he squashed Daniel Bryan at WrestleMania, so there was no hope for Sheamus after that. But in 2012, when he was a face in that match at Extreme Rules, Bryan carried him to a great match, 2 out of 3 falls at Extreme Rules 2012. So Miz and Swagger, like I said, just way worse than any champions that have been pushed this last year, like Kofi and Rollins, and heel Daniel Bryan was just a great run. Bryan just come back then. The Divas division back then was just awful. It still haunts me, that Vicky Guerrero frog splash at WrestleMania 26. I hated that Mania because Vince v Brett was just god awful. Swagger won the Money in the Bank, so I knew he was getting pushed, and he beat Jericho on the SmackDown right after Mania, which I'll mention in a minute as well about that. But the Divas were just bad. Rosa Mendez didn't know what wrestling was. Alicia Fox, like a Jinder Mahal. Funny that they paired those two in that mixed match challenge, because they both have like long legs, and just both look clumsy in the ring. No coordination. Eve Torres looks like she doesn't want to be there. Kelly wasn't good. It was only like Natalya and Beth Phoenix in those matches that were any good, to be honest. Gimmick pay-per-views, bad idea for me. Never supported them, because most matches don't deserve a special match type stipulation. I preferred it when they were done over feuds that deserved it, like Michaels and Triple H back in the day. That's when you bring in Hell in a Cell. That's when you do a 3 stages of Hell. Not every year. Hell in a Cell matches every year. TLC, it was better when it was the Hardys, Dudleys, Edge and Christian, and it happened not very often, not every single year. Elimination Chamber and Money in the Bank are stale and become predictable now. Chamber was good in 2009 when it come out. That was another thing I was going to say. My favourite pay-per-view in 2009, 2010 was Elimination Chamber 2009. It had 2 great chambers that year, and that's when it was interesting to do. I was okay with the chambers coming out, but it was called No Way Out then anyway. It actually wasn't called Elimination Chamber still yet. Ironically, Elimination Chamber 2019 was one of my favourite pay-per-views these last 2 years. So that was good. That was my dog, if you heard that then. What else? Yeah, those gimmick pay-per-views are just terribly overdone now by the year 2020. When I briefly mentioned about Jericho getting jobbed out to Jack Swagger, Jericho was underutilised in 2010. Look at Jericho, what he's still doing now. I would have loved to see a Y2J title run in 2010. Let him just run with the belt. Nexus was bad in 2010. People complain about Cena burying them, but I wasn't a fan of any of the guys in it anyway. I thought they were all awful other than Bryan. So when Bryan got fired, what's the point in Nexus? Those NXT game shows, the early days of NXT, terrible, just terrible. Like it was like Tough Enough, but even worse and awkward to watch. CM Punk should have been pushed in 2010. For me, he should have won the Rumble that year and won the WWE title from Triple H at Mania 26. Is the direction I would have went. A match between Punk and Triple H would have been money back in 2010. So now, just to finish off the video, I'll talk about some of the best moments. There's not many, so this won't take long, but the best moments in 2009 and 2010 were the Taker v Shawn feud and Punk v Hardy matches. No doubt that Punk v Hardy feud was legendary between those two in 2009. It's just a shame what year it took place in, because everything else was pretty much piss pot. The best stuff now is probably just really Bryan in 2019. The whole Bryan coming back and his heel run, Bryan v AJ Styles, two the greats from the indie scene, Ring of Honor, PWG. Bryan v Kofi, the build and the match at Mania. Like I said, Chamber 2009, Chamber 2019 were my favourite pay-per-views of the years 2009, 2010 and 2019 and 2020. Survivor Series was good in 2019 too, mainly due to NXT, because that's just run better, and NXT is just being the best product WWE has offered in the last 4 years now. And people I always see argued that time was better just because there was more legends there full time, like 2009, and for the first half of 2010 you had Cena, Undertaker, Batista, Triple H, Punk, Jericho, Michaels. But now you have guys who I consider legends just as much as those guys, whether people like it or not, like Bryan, Owens. Kevin Owens is awesome on the mic, better than Batista as a heel. AJ Styles, one of the best in-ring performers. Samoa Joe, Sami Zayn, Rollins. And then in both times, back then you had Jeff, Matt, Orton, Edge and Ray. But now you still have Jeff, Randy Orton, Edge just had a match at WrestleMania, about 10 years too late. Their match, they should have done that. Back at Mania 2025, and Ray's still around, so there's still just as many stars for me right now. So even with what's going on, I'd still say 2019, and even though it's been tough and I feel like the company should have took a break, 2020 is still better than 2009. The crap that we got, almost swore. Pisses me off that year that much, and 2010, which was just a continuation of bad booking and wrestling, if you can call it that.